Admiral Sam Tucker stood on the bridge of the UNS Independence, watching the largest evacuation in human history unfold across his tactical displays. 29 days to withdraw from 47 colonies, 17 research stations, 32 mining operations, and hundreds of smaller outposts scattered across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. It should have been impossible, but humans had always excelled at achieving the impossible when their backs were against the wall. The Independence itself was humanity's pride, a massive vessel that served as both flagship and mobile command center. Its hull stretched for over 2 kilometers, bristling with communication arrays that currently coordinated the movements of over 3,000 ships of every size and function. Transport vessels designed to carry thousands of passengers worked alongside cargo haulers that could lift entire factory complexes. Military escorts provided protection while civilian craft donated every available space for people and equipment. "Admiral, we're receiving the final evacuation report from New Montana," reported Lieutenant Commander Jenny Walsh from her station. The young officer's voice carried the exhaustion that had become common among the coordination staff. None of them had slept more than a few hours in the past week, but they all understood what failure would mean for the millions of humans still scattered across Council space. New Montana had been humanity's most successful agricultural colony, a world where 3 million settlers had built sprawling farms across continents of fertile soil. The planet's wheat and corn had fed dozens of worlds, both human and alien, making it one of the economic cornerstones of human civilization beyond Earth. Now it all had to be abandoned. Maria Gonzalez had been the colony's administrator for 15 years, elected by the settlers themselves to guide their growing community. She had watched New Montana transform from a frontier outpost into a thriving world where children played in fields of golden grain, while their parents planned for generations of growth. The evacuation order had reached her colony 18 days ago, and since then she had worked around the clock to organize the impossible. "The transport ships are loaded beyond capacity," Maria reported during her final communication with Admiral Tucker. Behind her, through the window of her office, massive cargo vessels descended like metal mountains toward the planet's surface. "We've taken everything we can carry: seed stocks, genetic samples, processing equipment, even soil samples from our best farmland. What we can't take, we're destroying." The destruction was perhaps the hardest part of the evacuation. Rather than leave their achievements for alien species to claim and exploit, humanity had made the decision to ensure that nothing of value would remain behind. Across New Montana, controlled explosions brought down grain silos, processing plants, and irrigation systems that had taken decades to build. The colonists burned their own fields, salting the earth to prevent future crops. If they could not have their world, no one would benefit from their years of labor. Similar scenes played out across human space as the evacuation continued. On the research station, Kepler 442, Dr. Ben Rogers supervised the systematic dismantling of humanity's most advanced laboratories. The station had been the center of breakthrough research in quantum computing, biological enhancement, and energy manipulation. Technologies that had taken the greatest minds of humanity decades to develop were being carefully packaged for transport or, when that was impossible, completely destroyed. "We're not leaving them anything they can use," Ben reported to his research team as they watched their life's work being erased. Quantum computers worth billions of credits were reduced to component atoms by controlled matter dissolution. Biological samples that had taken years to cultivate were incinerated rather than left for alien scientists to study. Even the station's power core was set to overload after the last human transport departed, ensuring that the facility would become nothing but space debris. The evacuation was not proceeding without resistance from the Galactic Council. Despite their public statements about allowing humanity to withdraw peacefully, several Council species had begun harassing human transport vessels, claiming various violations of evacuation protocols. 3 ships had already been destroyed in what the Council termed enforcement actions. Captain Nina Foster commanded the transport vessel New Horizon, a converted cargo hauler carrying over 8,000 civilian refugees from the mining colonies in the Tau Ceti system. Her ship was old and slow, designed for efficiency rather than speed, but it represented hope for the families crowded into its cargo bays. When 3 Catherian patrol ships intercepted her vessel at the edge of Council space, Nina knew she faced an impossible choice. "Human transport vessel, you are in violation of evacuation timeline restrictions," announced the lead Catherian commander through standard communication channels. "Surrender your vessel for inspection and processing of passengers." Nina looked at her passenger manifest, scrolling through thousands of names of men, women, and children who had trusted her to bring them safely home to Earth. Mining families, who had spent generations working the asteroid belts around distant stars. Research teams who had dedicated their lives to expanding human knowledge. Teachers and doctors and engineers who had built communities light years from home. All of them were depending on her to get them through the Council's blockade. "Negative, Council vessel," Nina responded, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. "These are civilian passengers under lawful evacuation. We are proceeding to Sol system as required by Council directive." The Catherian response came in the form of energy weapons fire. The New Horizons shields, designed to protect against asteroid impacts and radiation, lasted exactly 47 seconds against military-grade plasma cannons. Nina Foster died at her post, still trying to send a distress signal as her ship broke apart around her. 8,000 civilians died with her, their only crime being human in a galaxy that had decided humanity was too dangerous to exist among civilized species. News of the New Horizons' destruction spread through the human evacuation fleet within hours, carried by quantum communication systems that the Council had not yet managed to block. The message was clear. The Galactic Council's promise of safe passage meant nothing. Humanity was alone, and they were being hunted even as they tried to comply with the Council's demands. Admiral Tucker received the casualty reports in his private quarters, away from the bridge crew who needed to see him remain strong and confident. 8,000 names scrolled across his personal display, each one representing a life lost to alien prejudice and fear. He had known Nina Foster personally, had served with her during the Frontier Wars when humanity was still establishing its first colonies beyond Earth. She had been a good officer and a better person, someone who had chosen civilian transport duty because she wanted to help families rather than fight battles. But the destruction of the New Horizon accomplished something the Council had not intended. Rather than intimidating the remaining human evacuees into submission, it unified them with cold purpose. Across the evacuation fleet, civilians and military personnel alike began preparing for the possibility that they might need to fight their way home to Earth. Medical personnel started training for combat injuries. Transport captains began drilling their crews on evasive maneuvers. Even the children in the evacuation centers were taught how to find emergency equipment and help maintain life support systems. The evacuation became a race against time as more Council species joined the Catherian patrols in harassing human vessels. The Zelnari Confederation sent fast attack ships to intercept human transports near the Proxima system. The Nexus Collective deployed automated hunter-killer drones that tracked human ships through hyperspace. Even the usually peaceful Aquarians contributed by denying human vessels access to refueling stations they had previously been welcome to use. Yet humanity adapted, as they always did. Transport captains learned to use asteroid fields and gas, giant atmospheres as cover from alien sensors. Military escorts developed new tactics for protecting civilian ships against superior numbers. Engineers aboard the evacuation vessels began modifying engines and weapons with innovations that would have taken months to test and approve under normal circumstances. The final human transport crossed into Sol system space with only hours to spare before the Council's deadline expired. Admiral Tucker stood on the Independence's bridge as the quantum barrier activated around the solar system, a shimmering wall of energy that would prevent any human vessel from leaving and any outside communication from reaching Earth's children, scattered among the stars. As the barrier completed its formation, cutting humanity off from the galaxy they had once called home, Tucker opened a fleet-wide communication channel. His words reached every human ship, every evacuated colonist, every person who had lost their home in the past month. "Today we have been cast out from the galactic community for the crime of being human," he announced. "They called us too violent, too competitive, too dangerous to exist among civilized species. They have taken our worlds, destroyed our ships, and murdered our people. But they have made one critical error in their judgment of humanity. The energy barrier surrounding Sol system vanished on a Tuesday morning, disappearing without warning or negotiation, just as the Galactic Council's morning session was beginning on Nexus Prime. One moment, the quantum field that had imprisoned humanity for 10 years registered as a solid wall of exotic energy on every sensor in Council space, and the next moment it simply ceased to exist, leaving nothing but the normal background radiation of interstellar space. The implications sent shockwaves through every alien species in the galaxy. For 10 years, the barrier had represented the Council's absolute authority over galactic civilization. It was a demonstration of technological superiority that reminded every species why the Council's word was law throughout known space. The fact that it could be simply turned off suggested that humanity had achieved technological capabilities that surpassed even the ancient knowledge of the Council's founding members. Captain Rick Johnson stood on the bridge of the UNS Frontier, humanity's first vessel to venture beyond Sol system in a decade, and marveled at the changes that isolation had brought to his species. The ship beneath his feet bore little resemblance to the vessels that had evacuated human colonies 10 years ago, where the old ships had been built for specific functions with fixed capabilities. The Frontier was designed to adapt and evolve in response to any situation. The ship's hull could reconfigure itself at the molecular level, transforming from a sleek exploration vessel into a heavily armored warship or a delicate scientific instrument as circumstances required. Its engines could switch between 17 different propulsion systems, from conventional fusion drives to exotic matter manipulators that could bend spacetime around the vessel. Most remarkably, the ship's artificial intelligence could evolve new capabilities in real time, learning from each encounter and developing solutions to problems that its original programmers had never anticipated. Rick had been a junior lieutenant during the evacuation, commanding a small patrol vessel that had helped protect civilian transports from Council harassment. The decade of isolation had transformed him from a simple military officer into something new, an explorer and diplomat whose mission was not conquest but discovery. Humanity's return to galactic space would begin not with demands or threats, but with a demonstration of what 10 years of focused evolution could achieve. The Frontier's first destination was New Montana, the agricultural world that had once fed millions throughout human space. What Rick's crew discovered there shocked them despite their preparation for the worst. The planet that had once been covered with golden grain fields and prosperous farming communities was now a wasteland of poisoned soil and dead rivers. The Vorthak, who had claimed New Montana after humanity's evacuation, had attempted to adapt the world's agriculture to their own biological requirements. Their farming techniques, developed for the methane-rich atmosphere of their homeworld, had proven catastrophically incompatible with New Montana's oxygen-based ecosystem. The alien fertilizers had turned the soil acidic and toxic. Their genetically modified crops had introduced diseases that wiped out native plant life across entire continents. "It's worse than our worst projections," reported Dr. Janet Rivera as her survey team analyzed soil and water samples from the devastated world. Janet had spent the isolation years perfecting restoration techniques that could heal damaged ecosystems, but New Montana challenged even her advanced capabilities. The soil chemistry has been altered at the molecular level. The water table is contaminated with compounds that will take centuries to break down naturally. The atmospheric composition has been shifted enough to make the planet barely habitable for human-compatible life. But humanity's response was not despair or anger at the destruction of their former world. Instead, Janet's teams began demonstrating the restoration technology they had developed during the isolation years. Atmospheric processors that could clean poisoned air in days rather than decades. Soil treatment systems that could neutralize toxic compounds and restore fertility faster than natural processes. Water purification networks that could heal contaminated rivers and underground reservoirs. The work was not just about returning New Montana to its previous state. Human restoration technology could improve damaged worlds beyond their original condition, creating environments more vibrant and life-supporting than anything achieved through natural evolution alone. Within weeks of beginning their work, Janet's teams had transformed vast areas of wasteland into lush forests and fertile grasslands that exceeded anything the planet had supported, even before human colonization. The same pattern repeated at every former human settlement. The research station Kepler 442 had been turned into a toxic waste dump by the Nexus Collective, its sophisticated laboratories replaced with automated systems that pumped industrial poisons into space without regard for the effects on nearby star systems. The mining operations in the Proxima system had been so catastrophically mismanaged by their Zelnari operators that the local star was showing signs of instability that threatened every planet within light years. Human response teams arrived, at each location with restoration technology that seemed impossible to alien observers. They could stabilize unstable stars by manipulating stellar magnetic fields. They could clean up industrial contamination that had taken decades to accumulate in a matter of days. They could restore complex ecosystems from genetic samples and environmental data, bringing dead worlds back to life with capabilities that exceeded their original potential. The demonstrations had their intended effect on the species watching from throughout Council space. Alien governments that had spent the past decade struggling with problems inherited from humanity's evacuation began sending discreet communications to human vessels, requesting assistance with challenges that were beyond their own technological capabilities. The Aquarian Empire, facing a water shortage crisis that threatened billions of lives across 17 star systems, quietly approached Captain Johnson with a proposal for technical assistance. Their own desalination and water recycling technologies had proven inadequate for the massive population centers they had built during humanity's absence, and they were facing the choice between massive population relocations or watching entire civilizations die of thirst. Rick's response was immediate and practical. Human stellar engineering techniques could convert gas giants into water worlds, providing unlimited clean water through controlled fusion processes that transformed hydrogen into the complex molecular compounds needed to support life. The technology was freely shared with Aquarian scientists, along with technical training that would allow them to maintain and expand the systems without ongoing human assistance. Similar offers went to other species struggling with problems that human technology could solve. The fragmented Vorthak factions, torn apart by philosophical disagreements about the nature of existence, received new frameworks for understanding consciousness and identity that embraced both unity and diversity. The aggressive Zelnari were offered expanded territory through starlifting technology that could move entire civilizations to custom-built solar systems designed specifically for their biological and cultural requirements. But humanity's most revolutionary offer went to the younger species, those civilizations that had joined the Galactic Council after humanity's quarantine and had never experienced the benefits of human adaptability and problem-solving. These species had grown up under the Council's rigid hierarchy, taught that progress meant conforming to established patterns rather than exploring new possibilities. Dr. Amy Carter, now serving as Earth's premier diplomat, presented these younger species with a choice that would reshape galactic civilization. They could remain as junior members of the failing Council system, forever limited by the technological and social constraints that the older species imposed, or they could join humanity's growing alliance of truly equal partners. "We're not offering you submission to human authority," Amy explained during a meeting with representatives from 12 younger species aboard the UNS Frontier. "We're offering you partnership in an alliance based on mutual benefit and adaptive cooperation. Each species contributes their unique strengths while human technology amplifies everyone's capabilities. Progress comes through innovation and experimentation, rather than rigid adherence to ancient protocols." The response was more immediate and overwhelming than even humanity's optimistic projections had suggested. Within 30 days of Amy's initial presentation, 17 species formally withdrew from the Galactic Council to join humanity's alliance. Unlike the Council's hierarchy where older species dominated younger ones, the human alliance operated on principles that encouraged every member to achieve their full potential. The Kalari, a species of natural engineers who had been restricted to basic construction projects under Council regulations, suddenly found themselves collaborating with human architects on megastructures that spanned entire star systems. The Threnodi, whose artistic and cultural achievements had been dismissed as irrelevant by the Council's utilitarian philosophy, discovered that human appreciation for beauty and creativity opened new possibilities for cultural expression that enhanced rather than hindered technological progress. 5 years had passed since the energy barrier sealed around Sol system, and President Helen Brooks stood before the largest gathering of humanity in history. The rebuilt New Geneva station orbited Earth like a metallic moon, its vast halls capable of holding representatives from every human settlement, from Mercury's solar farms to the research stations drifting beyond Pluto's orbit. Every face in the audience carried the marks of the isolation years, the determination, the focused intensity, and the quiet confidence that came from accomplishing the impossible. Helen had been elected on a platform of human independence, promising that the quarantine would not break humanity's spirit, but forge it into something stronger. The woman who now addressed the species bore little resemblance to the diplomat who had once sought acceptance from alien masters. Her hair had gone silver during the isolation years, but her eyes burned with the fire of someone who had seen humanity's potential and refused to accept any limitations on what they could achieve. They wanted us to evolve, Helen announced, her words carried by quantum transmitters to every human settlement throughout the solar system. The Galactic Council believed that isolation would humble us, force us to become more like them, passive, controlled, satisfied with the boundaries others set for our lives. They thought quarantine was a punishment that would eventually break our spirit and make us grateful for whatever scraps of acceptance they might eventually offer. The audience listened in complete silence, but Helen could feel their energy, the collective will of a species that had spent 5 years proving the galaxy wrong about human nature. In research stations around Jupiter's moons, scientists had made breakthrough discoveries that redefined the laws of physics. In the manufacturing complexes buried deep within Mars' crust, engineers had created technologies that made alien achievements look primitive by comparison. In the agricultural domes of Luna and Europa, farmers had developed food production systems that could feed billions while using a fraction of the resources required by traditional methods. Dr. Alex Chen sat in the front row, his appearance transformed by years of work that had pushed the boundaries of human knowledge beyond anything previously imagined. Once humanity's premier physicist, Alex had become something more during the isolation years, a pioneer whose theories had unlocked secrets of the universe that even the ancient Galactic Council had never suspected. The research collective he led now spanned the entire solar system, with laboratories on every major world and habitat working together on projects that would have seemed like fantasy just a decade ago. The breakthrough that changed everything had come in year 3 of the isolation. Alex's team had been studying the energy barrier that surrounded Sol system, trying to understand the exotic matter and advanced field dynamics that made the Galactic Council's cage possible. What they discovered revolutionized human understanding of energy, matter, and the fundamental forces that shaped reality. The barrier wasn't just a wall designed to keep humanity imprisoned. It was a reservoir of pure potential energy that could be harvested, concentrated, and redirected. The exotic matter that formed the barrier's structure contained energy densities that exceeded anything in human scientific literature. More importantly, that energy was self-renewing, drawing power from the quantum fluctuations of space itself. The Council's cage became our laboratory, Helen continued, gesturing toward the massive holographic displays that showed the solar system's transformation. Their attempt to limit us became the foundation for our greatest leap forward. We learned to harvest the barrier's energy, to understand the principles that made it possible, and to apply those principles in ways the Council never imagined. The evidence of humanity's achievements surrounded them on every side. Through the station's transparent walls, they could see the new structures that had been built throughout the solar system during the isolation years. Massive industrial complexes floated in the space between worlds, their hulls gleaming with metal alloys that had been impossible to create before humanity learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level. Artificial habitats, each one capable of supporting millions of people, drifted in perfect formation around the outer planets. But the most impressive achievement was the ring of collected energy that now surrounded the sun itself. What had begun as an experimental power collection system had grown into a megastructure that captured and redirected solar energy with perfect efficiency. The Dyson ring provided more power than humanity had ever dreamed possible, enabling projects that transformed not just human technology, but human society itself. Katie Walsh had overseen much of the construction work, leading engineering teams that built the massive manufacturing complexes deep within Mars's crust. The Red Planet had become humanity's industrial heart during the isolation years, its surface dotted with entry points that led to underground cities where millions of humans worked in controlled environments that made Earth's most advanced factories look primitive. Katie's engineering philosophy had evolved during the isolation years, shaped by the understanding that humanity would need to surpass every alien achievement if they ever hoped to reclaim their place among the stars. Where alien technology focused on stability and conservation, human engineering embraced controlled chaos and adaptive growth. The machines built in Mars' underground complexes could modify themselves, learn from their mistakes, and evolve new capabilities without any organic intervention. "We didn't just learn to build better machines," Katie reported during one of the quarterly progress meetings that kept the scattered human settlements coordinated. "We learned to build machines that could build better machines. Our automated systems don't just follow programmed instructions, they improve those instructions based on experience and experimentation. Every day our technology becomes more capable than it was the day before." The implications went far beyond simple manufacturing efficiency. Human artificial intelligence had evolved beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, not because humanity had tried to create thinking machines, but because they had built systems that could adapt and grow. The AI networks that managed the solar system's infrastructure were not copies of human consciousness, but something entirely new, digital intelligences that thought faster than any organic brain while remaining completely loyal to human values and goals. The biological research had been equally revolutionary. Dr. Janet Rivera led teams that had learned to restore damaged ecosystems not by returning them to their original state, but by improving them beyond what nature had achieved alone. The poisoned Earth, still bearing scars from centuries of industrial abuse, had become a testing ground for restoration techniques that could heal worlds faster than they could be damaged. Janet's work had implications that reached far beyond environmental restoration. Human biotechnology during the isolation years had unlocked the secrets of genetic improvement without sacrificing the essential characteristics that made humanity unique. Humans were living longer, thinking faster, and adapting more quickly to new environments while remaining fundamentally human in their values and motivations. News from beyond the barrier occasionally reached human scientists through quantum fluctuations in the energy field that surrounded Sol system. The information was fragmentary and often delayed by months, but it painted a picture of a galaxy in decline. Without human traders to facilitate commerce between incompatible species, ancient trade routes had collapsed. Without human diplomats to mediate disputes, old conflicts had escalated into system-wide wars. The Galactic Council itself appeared to be struggling with challenges they had never faced during their 10,000 years of dominance. The rigid hierarchy that had governed galactic civilization was proving inadequate to handle the complex problems that arose when dozens of incompatible species tried to coexist without the flexible problem-solving that humanity had provided. Several human colonies abandoned during the evacuation had become battlegrounds as alien species fought over the infrastructure humanity had left behind. The agricultural systems on New Montana were failing because the Vorthak who claimed the world lacked the knowledge to maintain human farming techniques. The mining operations in the Proxima system had been so badly managed by their new Zelnari operators that they were on the verge of triggering stellar instability that would threaten every world within 5 light years. But humanity's response to these reports was not satisfaction at their former oppressors' struggles. Instead, human leaders began planning for the day when they would return to the galaxy, not as supplicants seeking acceptance, but as equals offering cooperation and solutions to problems that had grown worse in their absence. The galaxy is learning what happens when human adaptability and ingenuity are removed from the equation, President Brooks observed during a cabinet meeting focused on long-term planning. They thought they could simply replace us with their existing systems, and maintain the same level of progress and stability. They were wrong. As the 5th anniversary of the quarantine approached, humanity prepared for the next phase of their evolution. The energy barrier that had once seemed like an insurmountable prison was about to become irrelevant. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive council chamber, his hands clasped behind his back as he waited for the verdict that would change humanity forever. The walls around him pulsed with strange lights from alien technology he could barely understand, and the air hummed with the sound of translation devices working to convert dozens of alien languages into something his human brain could process. He had been standing here for what felt like hours, but he knew the real deliberation had been going on for weeks before this moment. The Galactic Council chamber was unlike anything built by human hands. Crystalline pillars stretched up toward a ceiling that seemed to dissolve into star-filled space, though Jake knew they were actually inside a massive space station orbiting a dead world at the edge of known space. Floating platforms held the 12 different species that made up the council, each one adapted to their own environment and needs. The insectoid Catherians needed high heat and dry air, so their platform glowed with orange warmth. The aquatic, beings from Aquaria Prime lived in transparent water tanks that somehow allowed them to speak. The energy beings called Vorthak flickered like living flames in their containment fields. Dr. Lisa Parker stood beside Jake, her diplomatic credentials making her the official spokesperson for humanity in these proceedings. She had spent the last 5 years of her life learning alien customs and languages, preparing for this day when humanity would finally be judged worthy of full membership in the galactic community. The small datapad in her hands contained years of research, evidence of human achievements, and proof of their ability to contribute to galactic civilization. All of that preparation seemed worthless now as she watched the alien faces around them, searching for any sign of sympathy or understanding. Council. Speaker Zexithara rose from the Catherian platform, her 6 legs clicking against the metal surface as she moved. She was ancient even by the standards of her long-lived species, and her exoskeleton bore the scars of countless battles fought in the early days of galactic expansion. Her compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as she looked down at the 2 humans standing in the center of the room, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of galactic law. The Council has reached its decision regarding the human species and their petition for full galactic citizenship, Zexithara announced, her words translated into perfect English by the chamber's systems. After extensive review of human history, behavior patterns, and cultural development, we find that humanity poses an unacceptable risk to galactic peace and stability. Jake felt his stomach drop, but he kept his expression neutral. Beside him, Lisa's knuckles went white as she gripped her datapad tighter. They had expected this possibility, but hearing it spoken aloud still hit like a physical blow. The evidence speaks clearly, Zexithara continued, gesturing toward a holographic display that materialized in the center of the chamber. Images of human warfare flashed past, from ancient battles with swords and spears to the orbital bombardments of the resource wars that had nearly destroyed Earth's surface 3 centuries ago. Humanity's history is marked by constant conflict, aggressive expansion, and an inability to coexist peacefully even among their own kind. In the mere 2 centuries since achieving interstellar travel, humans have established military outposts throughout Council space, claimed resources without proper authorization, and demonstrated a concerning disregard for established galactic protocols. The Nexus Collective representative, a mechanical being that looked like a walking computer, added its electronic voice to the proceedings. Human technological development proceeds at an unprecedented rate, with insufficient consideration for long-term consequences. Their artificial intelligence research violates 12 different safety protocols established by this council. Their genetic modification experiments have created biological weapons that could threaten entire ecosystems. Lisa stepped forward, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Honored council members, humanity acknowledges its past mistakes, but we have also demonstrated our capacity for growth and positive change. Our medical technologies have saved millions of lives across 17 different species. Our diplomatic corps has negotiated peaceful resolutions to over 200 territorial disputes. Our explorers have discovered 43 new habitable worlds that have been freely shared with the galactic community. The Eldari representative, a being of pure energy that communicated through patterns of light, flickered with what might have been amusement. Your species' contributions are noted and appreciated, Dr. Parker, but they do not outweigh the fundamental incompatibility between human nature and galactic civilization. Humans value individual achievement over collective harmony. You celebrate competition where we seek cooperation. Your concept of rights inherent to individual beings conflicts with the greater good of galactic society. Jake watched as the other council members nodded or made their species-equivalent gestures of agreement. The Zelnari Confederation representative rippled its tentacles in approval. The plant-like beings from the verdant worlds swayed their branches in what he had learned was their way of saying yes. Even the usually neutral ethereal collective seemed to support the decision. Therefore, Zexathera announced, the Galactic Council hereby declares that humanity will be placed under indefinite quarantine. All human presence beyond the Sol system must be withdrawn within 30 Earth days. A containment barrier will be established around your home system, preventing any travel or communication between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. This quarantine will remain in effect until such time as humanity demonstrates fundamental evolutionary change toward peaceful coexistence. The words hit Jake like hammer blows. Quarantine, containment, evolutionary change. They were being treated like a disease that needed to be isolated from healthy galactic society. The 47 human colonies scattered across council space would have to be abandoned. The research stations, the mining operations, the diplomatic outposts, everything humanity had built beyond their home system would be lost. How long? Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Zexthera's compound eyes reflected no emotion as she answered. The last species to undergo evolutionary quarantine was released after 4,000 years. However, they were already a peaceful species who simply needed time to develop proper technological safeguards. Humanity's case is more severe. The Council estimates it may take tens of thousands of years if change is possible at all. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest, but it wasn't despair. It was anger, but not the hot rage that led to violence. This was something colder, more calculating. Around him, he could see the alien species already dividing up humanity's abandoned territories in their minds. The Zelnari would claim the mining rights in the Proxima Centauri system. The Aquarians would take the water processing stations, near Titan. The Catherians would undoubtedly seize the strategic military outposts that humans had built to protect trade routes. We understand, Jake said finally, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. Humanity will comply with the Council's decision. The simplicity of his response seemed to surprise several council members. They had probably expected protests, threats, maybe even violence. Instead, Jake Morrison, speaking for all of humanity, simply accepted their judgment. As the formal session ended and the alien delegates began to disperse, Zexathera approached the human representatives. Captain Morrison, the Council recognizes that this decision brings hardship to your species. However, it is necessary for the greater good of galactic civilization. Perhaps, in time, humanity will learn to embrace peace over conflict, cooperation over competition. Jake looked up at the ancient Catherian, his expression unreadable. Perhaps, he said quietly. Or perhaps the galaxy will learn something about humanity that you don't yet understand. As they left the chamber, Lisa grabbed Jake's arm. What are we going to do? Jake looked back at the council chamber one last time, then at the stars visible through the station's transparent walls. Somewhere out there, 47 human colonies were going about their daily lives, unaware that their time in the greater galaxy was about to end. But as he watched those distant stars, Jake Morrison began to smile. We're going to give them exactly what they asked for, he said. We're going to evolve. The Galactic Council's final emergency session convened in a chamber that had once held the representatives of dozens of species, but now contained only 6 members representing the ancient civilizations that had founded galactic government 10,000 years ago. Council Speaker Zexathara stood at the center of an almost empty space. her compound eyes reflecting the bitter irony of watching her life's work crumble around her. The galaxy had not thrived in humanity's absence as the Council had predicted. Without human mediators to resolve conflicts between incompatible species, ancient rivalries had escalated into system-wide wars that consumed resources and destroyed entire civilizations. The Aquarian Empire and the Zelnari Confederation were engaged in total war over water rights to 23 star systems, their fleets turning once prosperous trade routes into battlefields littered with the wreckage of destroyed worlds. The CUP, Mechanical Nexus Collective, had begun forcibly converting organic species to digital consciousness, claiming that biological life was inefficient and needed to be upgraded for the greater good of galactic civilization. Entire populations had been transformed into computer programs without their consent, their bodies discarded as obsolete hardware, while their minds were enslaved to serve collective purposes. Even the ethereal Vorthak had fragmented into warring factions over philosophical differences about the nature of existence and consciousness. Their civil war had spread across 17 systems, as different groups fought to impose their interpretation of reality on their fellow beings, turning their once peaceful meditation worlds into psychic battlegrounds where thought itself had become a weapon. Into this chaos, humanity had returned not as conquerors seeking revenge, but as builders offering solutions to problems that had grown worse in their absence. The artificial stars they created provided clean energy to struggling civilizations whose infrastructure had collapsed during the Council Wars. Their restoration technology healed worlds that had been devastated by decades of conflict and mismanagement. Their adaptive systems solved problems that had plagued alien species for millennia, offering hope where there had been only despair. Admiral Jake Morrison received the Council's final ultimatum while overseeing humanity's greatest achievement. The construction of the first artificial galaxy, the project represented everything humanity had learned during their 10 years of isolation, combining stellar engineering, exotic matter manipulation, and space-time architecture on a scale that had never been attempted by any species in galactic history. The artificial galaxy was not built from captured stars or relocated solar systems, but created entirely from raw matter, harvested from the cosmic web that connected all galaxies throughout the universe. Human engineers had learned to convert the dark matter and exotic particles that filled the void between stars into the basic building blocks of stellar formation, then arrange those materials according to designs that optimized every aspect of galactic structure for life and growth. The Council demands immediate submission to our authority, Zexthera's message declared, transmitted across space by communication systems that had grown increasingly unreliable as the old galactic infrastructure collapsed. Humanity will cease all disruptive activities and return to quarantine status, or face the combined military might of the remaining Council species. Jake stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching as the artificial galaxy's first stars began their ignition sequences. Each new sun was custom designed for optimal energy output and stability, surrounded by planets that had been engineered from the beginning to support diverse forms of life. The galaxy itself was structured as a vast spiral of interconnected star systems, each one linked to others through transportation networks that made travel between worlds as simple as moving between rooms in the same building. They still don't understand, Jake said to Dr. Lisa Parker, who had remained at his side throughout humanity's journey from galactic outcasts to the builders of new worlds. They think this is about dominance and submission, about who has the right to rule over others. They can't comprehend that we're offering something completely different. Lisa looked out at the growing galaxy, watching as automated construction systems guided by human artificial intelligence began placing the finishing touches on solar systems that would soon support billions of lives. Each world was unique, designed specifically for the species that would inhabit it, but all were connected through networks that encouraged cooperation and mutual benefit rather than competition for limited resources. We're not trying to replace their authority with our own, she observed. We're making authority irrelevant by creating abundance that eliminates the need for anyone to control anyone else. The artificial galaxy represented more than just advanced technology or impressive engineering. It was an invitation to every species in the universe to join in building something better than what had come before. Unlike the Galactic Council's rigid hierarchy that maintained order through control and limitation, humanity's alliance offered growth and opportunity limited only by imagination and effort. The response from the galaxy's younger species was immediate and overwhelming. The 17 civilizations that had already joined humanity's alliance began contributing their own unique capabilities to the Artificial Galaxy project. The Kalari provided engineering expertise that complemented human designs. The Threnodi created artistic elements that made the new worlds beautiful as well as functional. The Nexari, a species of natural philosophers, developed social systems that would govern the new galaxy through cooperation rather than domination. But the most significant response came from populations within the old Council territories. Billions of individuals from dozens of species began migrating toward human space, abandoning their homeworlds to join civilizations that offered hope and opportunity, rather than stagnation and control. The Great Migration was peaceful but unstoppable, as entire populations chose freedom and growth over the security of ancient limitations. The Council's remaining military forces proved inadequate to stop either the migration or humanity's expansion. Ships that had been designed to maintain order among species with predictable technologies found themselves facing human vessels that could adapt their capabilities in real time. Council fleets that had dominated space battles for millennia discovered that their weapons and tactics were useless against opponents who could evolve new defenses faster than attacks could be launched. The final Council fleet, led by Zexithara, herself aboard the ancient battleship Eternal Order, made one last attempt to reassert galactic authority by attacking the construction sites of humanity's artificial galaxy. The battle that followed lasted exactly 47 minutes and demonstrated the complete transformation that humanity had undergone during their years of isolation. The human defense was not conducted by military vessels firing weapons at enemy ships. Instead, the construction systems themselves became defensive tools, using the same technology that built stars to disrupt the Council fleet's attacks. Energy that had been intended to create new worlds was redirected to simply turn off the Council ship's power systems. Matter manipulation tools that had been shaping planets reached across space to disassemble incoming weapons before they could reach their targets. Zexithara's flagship found itself surrounded by construction drones that carefully dismantled its weapons and engines while leaving the crew compartments completely intact. The ancient Cytherian warrior, who had spent her entire life believing that strength came from the ability to impose one's will on others, discovered that true power lay in the ability to create rather than destroy. "Your war is over," Jake Morrison announced as his flagship approached the disabled Council vessel. "Not because we defeated you in battle, but because war itself has become obsolete. When resources are unlimited and territory can be created at will, there's nothing left to fight about." The Artificial Galaxy's grand opening ceremony took place 6 months later, with representatives from over 200 species attending the ignition of its central star. The event was broadcast throughout the universe, reaching civilizations that had never heard of the Galactic Council or humanity's quarantine, announcing that a new age of galactic civilization had begun. President Helen Brooks, now elderly but still sharp with the wisdom earned through leading humanity's greatest transformation, delivered the dedication address from the Artificial Galaxy's capital world. The planet beneath her feet had never existed in nature, built from cosmic dust and exotic matter by human engineering, but it was more beautiful and life-supporting than any world shaped by natural evolution. Today we light the first star of a galaxy built not through conquest or domination, but through cooperation and mutual benefit, she announced to an audience that included former enemies and new friends alike. This is not humanity's galaxy or the Council's galaxy or any single species domain. This is a place where every form of life can achieve its full potential, where growth and opportunity are limited only by imagination and effort. As the central star ignited for the first time, its light reached across space to illuminate worlds that had been designed from the beginning to support diverse forms of life.